Hi everyone, this is Brad with the Little Traverse Conservancy, and as you can see, my gosh, it is a bright sunshiny day outside. It is almost too warm, so I'm gonna jump right into the Fisher Nature Preserve here. I'm gonna take this convenient little bridge and I'm gonna cool off, show you guys some interesting stuff that's hanging out in our nature preserves. Let's check them out. It's just a short little path to get to our destination, and as we get closer, I'm gonna be quiet so you can hear what's going on. Whoa! Look at that. Awesome. I hope you've been here before. If you haven't, it's a wonderful little shady spot to hang out in under all the hemlocks and cedar trees. But let's talk a little bit more about what's going on and why there's a fountain here in the first place. Alright, so what we're seeing right here is exactly how Harbor Springs got its name. This is a natural spring that comes out of the ground. The springs are really interesting because of how cold the water is. It comes right up from the ground. Actually, that water spitting out of the fountain right there was underground just a few seconds ago, and it came right out. These springs are all over town. I'm going to include a map. There are over a dozen of them around the Harbor Springs area, and down even in Petoskey and inland towards Lansing. So these natural springs, they come out of the ground and they come from what is called an aquifer. Aquifer is kind of a silly sounding word, but an aquifer is just a huge reserve of water underneath the ground that's hidden inside all the rocks, right? So somebody a long time ago, this one's been flowing for almost 100 years now, they found where the water was and they punched a straw boom, right straight down, almost like a juice box, basically. They punched a tube down, and there's no pump, there's no machine that makes that fountain run at all. It's just all naturally occurring from all the pressure, from all the soil on top of this aquifer. It pushes down on it, and when you punch a hole, it's like squeezing the juice box. Luckily for us, the juice box never runs out because it's always being recharged by things like rain and runoff, precipitation. So let's check out, whoa, this stuff is so clean and clear. Because it comes out of the ground, it's been filtered a few times already. So once it comes right out, we don't have to worry about chemicals or anything because it's already been filtered. This stuff you could technically drink right out of the middle, but once it kind of gets into the pond, it tends to sit. There's some moss and some algae, so it's probably a safe bet to go ahead and not drink out of this one. But how did they know in the first place to punch that straw down there? We're gonna follow the creek and hopefully we'll see a clue right over here. So what I've found is that the ground over here is really wet and mucky. It's really weird looking. If we look at this little puddle and look uphill from it, we see there's no water up there. So it didn't run down the hill, so it must be bubbling up from the surface. Actually, if I dig down just a little bit, you can see the water's actually running. So this is another spring just a few feet away from our first spring, and this might have been how somebody was able to tell that this is a good spot to punch a hole down there. These little seeps come out of the hill. It's really wet and mucky. We're gonna look at an even cooler one that we have on the Bubbling Springs Nature Preserve. You can actually see the water coming right up out of the ground. We have made it to Bubbling Springs. We can see a lot of the same trees that we had. It's nice and shady and cool down here. The only thing cooler than the shade is the water that's coming up out of the ground. So let's walk on over here and look at one of the springs that just happens to be bubbling right now. Whoa. Can you see it? There's actually several of them. You can see where the sand is moving around. That's where the water is coming up again out of that aquifer, and it is creating some of the little creeks that flow through here. This one's also got a lot of moss. So that water is bubbling up all day, every day, all night. There were some wells in town a long time ago that claimed that they would put out 10,000 barrels of water every day. A barrel's about 42 gallons, so that means 420,000 gallons of water were coming up out of the ground every single day, and they just never ever stopped. It seems like a pretty big number, but an Olympic-sized pool is a little over 600,000, so not quite as much water every day to fill up a giant pool, but that's still a pretty significant amount of water to just be coming up out of these little springs.